Okay, so week number one in our leadership skills series is going to be really centered around building trust, building that rapport. That is the first step in being a good leader because, basically if you think about it, any person who thinks he or she is a good leader but they don't have trust or they don't have the rapport with their people, they're fooling themselves. People aren't going to listen to us. They're not going to pay attention to us. So that's the first phase. So the very first thing that you want to keep in mind in order to build that really good trust and rapport with people is you want to realize that criticism can be your worst enemy when you're building that trust and rapport. So tip number one is you want to avoid criticizing. Avoid being the person who's complaining all the time. I'll give you a good example of this. If you think about your relationships, every relationship that you have with each individual person that you've ever interacted with as being kind of a separate bank account. If you think about it, back in the olden days, we used to have like a check registry and it had the transactions and then it had the deposits that you would make into that account and then the withdrawals and then you had a balance on the backside. So basically what would happen is anytime you made a deposit into that bank account, you'd add a positive balance. If anytime you made a withdrawal, took something out of ATM or wrote a check, you had to subtract something from the balance. Well, if you think about your relationships with people that way, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of understand how all of these first 7 principles, especially principle number 1, really works. Is that every time you do something positive with a person, you're building that trust, you're building that rapport. Anytime we do something negative, we're making a withdrawal from that bank account. And a lot of times what folks will kind of come up to me and they'll say, well, Doug, what about constructive criticism? That's good, right? I mean, that's how I learn is when somebody gives me constructive criticism. I always tell people when they bring that up that, when was the last time somebody came up to you and gave you some of that constructive criticism? And then as they were walking away, you kind of grabbed them by the arm and you said, God bless you. Thank you so much for being such a good person to me. If you hadn't helped me if you hadn't pointed out that I'd made that mistake, I'd just continue making that same silly mistake over and over again. You're such a really good, true friend, right? Of course not. I mean, we don't react that way. Even if somebody gives us constructive criticism, we still will tend to react in a negative way. The difference is the bank account that we have with that person. So if we have a really positive balance in that bank account and somebody gives us constructive criticism, it still hurts, but we'll go, this person's always been fair to me, so this is probably something I want to listen to. However, if somebody who has a neutral balance, just a zero balance in that bank account, somebody we meet for the first time, they give us constructive criticism, the automatic reaction is totally different. It's, who are you to tell me what I need to be doing? And if we have a negative balance in that bank account, that's when we'll start to get aggressive when somebody gives us constructive criticism. So the point is that constructive criticism can be helpful in some relationships. However, the thing that you want to keep in mind is that when you criticize somebody, even if it's constructive criticism, you're still going to reduce that rapport that you have with that person. So if your major goal, just like it is in week 1 of the leadership series, is to build that trust and rapport, you probably want to avoid criticizing as much as possible. Hey, by the way, when you get to the 3rd week of these principles, we're going to show you 7 ways to gain cooperation from people that are 7 things that you can do other than criticizing people to get them to change behavior that work a whole lot better than the criticism. So tip number 1, avoid criticizing.